Hello everybody and welcome back to another video on the channel, and it's another Java video. And a lot of you are like, I know your last video didn't get 10 likes, but why are you making another Java video? Well, the answer is because you guys liked it. I could tell based on the views and watch time within the first 2 hours of it being uploaded. It was it was a little bit more than I intended. And that just made me think that you guys like Java. So I'm just gonna go ahead and make another Java video. This time, it's about variables. The key thing about variables is that variables store information, and they can store information in 5 ways. In other words, there are 5 types of variables. First are the string. Strings is what I have right here. Strings are essentially text with double quotes in between, or double quotes on the sides. And that's pretty much what strings are. They're just text enclosed with double quotes. Next, you have float. A lot of people call it double. Double is more of a precise version of float. Double can store more information because it's 64-bit and it can store 16 places after the decimal. However, float can only store 7 digits after the decimal because it's 32-bit. So the difference between float and double, the only difference is that double is more precise and it can store more numbers after the decimal. A lot of people like to use double, obviously, because it's more precise and it makes the code precise, I guess you can say. Float is just bland and it's not really specific like double is. So I'm not going to really be using float that often. I'm going to be using double instead. However, if you want to use float, you can, but whenever you get to like a long number, when there's more than 7 numbers after the decimal, then you want to switch over to double. But just to get into the habit, I recommend to just use double and just leave float completely alone. Next, we have the integer. The integer is essentially it's just the integer variables. They store positive numbers or negative numbers. They're whole numbers. And then you have the characters. Characters store one letter, and they're enclosed with single quotes. And then finally, you have Boolean, which is one value that can store either true or false. So just to clear up the confusion with float and double, once again, double is more of a precise version than float. So I say just ignore float and just use double instead. They do the same thing, but instead double just stores more numbers after the decimal. So you're going to see me use float a lot, so it's just better to get into the habit of using float. I'm commonly saying that double does 54 bits and float does 32 bits. A bit is essentially a single unit that stores one value. It can store a 0 or it can store a 1. 8 bits make 1 byte. Since double is 64 bits, that means it can store more values after the decimal point, which is why it's better to use double over float. But now let's get started with our code. In the last video on my Java introduction, I talked about what this code means. Java has a syntax, it has a structure to it because it's object oriented. That means it has a structure. So the first thing I went over is the class. Every Java program must have a class name. This class name must match your file name because it will tell the program to access this file from variables.java. So when you say variables, it will access that. Next, you have your main. Main is like the head of every Java program, and anything inside main is what is going to show on your console or your terminal. And then lastly, you have your system.out.println. And what this is essentially going to do is that it's going to print whatever's inside into the console. So now let's get started with how we can do variables in Java. In order to store variables, we have to use the equal sign because that will assign it to it. So the first thing we have to do is we have to specify our type of variable. I'm going to go ahead and do string. After this, we can just go ahead and say equal. Oh, we have to have the name first. So after you have your type of variable, you then need to make a name for this variable. I'm going to do fruit. I'm going to do equal, and then I'm going to do apple. Since apple is a text, you want to enclose it in quotation marks, and then put a semicolon. Semicolons are really important because what they do is that they end the statement and it tells the code that you're ready to start the next statement. After this, we can then add our print statement. System.out.println, and then let's say fruit, because fruit was the name of our variable, and then end it with a semicolon. And there we go, we have finished and we have stored our variable. So we have stored fruit, we made fruit apple. So what the terminal is going to do is that it's going to make it apple. Let's run it, and it shows apple. So I hope that made some sense. I did a string, and I made string fruit, and then I made it apple, and then I just made it print the variable name. The name of the variable, and the name of the variable this time is fruit. So it printed apple, which was the name of the which was stored in the variable. Hopefully that makes sense. The next thing is int. So let's say int, and then let's just say number. You'll see an error, and that error is because apple is not an integer. Integers are whole numbers. So I'm gonna go ahead and say 1. We do not need to do quotation marks because 1 is not a string. You only need double quotes over strings because strings are text and they must be enclosed within quotation marks. So let's go ahead and print, let's say number. Let's save it and then let's run it. What this is going to do is that's going to print 1. The next thing is double. So let's go ahead and say double. Let's call it decimal. And then, I don't know a long decimal. So I'm just going to go ahead and say 3.142657894409394. Okay, that's just a really long decimal. And then let's just say system.out.println. Let's say decimal. Right there. And then let's go ahead and run that. And now double will allow you to print that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So yeah, I exceeded 7, but I went ahead and used double, which will allow it to store more than that. If I went ahead and did float, you're going to see an error because it's not going to let you store that many because float isn't able to do that. Add cast, change type of decimal to double. That means I need to go ahead and change this to double in order for it to work and for the error to go away. The next thing is char. So let's say char, or character, and then let's say letter. And then we enclose it in with single quotes, and let's say A. It can be a capital A or lowercase a, but it just needs to be 1, and we enclose it in with single quotes. And then let's make this letter, because letter is the name of our variable. Whatever you put inside the println statement should be the name. It shouldn't be the value, it should be the name. The value is this right here. It's what you're assigning the variable to, or it's what you're storing in the variable. Your value is what you store in the variable. Okay, that definitely makes sense. Okay, and then let's go ahead and run our code. And now it says A. Lastly, we have Boolean. Boolean kind of works a little bit different, but it does work the same way. So it says Boolean, and then we're going to say statement. I'm just going to go ahead and make it equal true. We do not need anything because it's not a char or a string. And then let's print the statement. I didn't get any errors, which is good, so let's go ahead and run it. And now we got true, just like that. So those were the 5 types of variables. Now we can get into something a little bit in depth. This is where we're just going to go ahead and ignore the rest, and we're going to focus on string specifically. I didn't want to make a separate video on this because I can just quickly go over it. So let's go ahead and change this to string. What we can do in Java is that we can store a string and we can store a variable. So I'm gonna make this equal to let's just do that. And then let's just say system.out.println. Let's do that. And then let's say plus, and then let's say the name of our variable. I'm just going to say name. I'm probably going to get some errors here. That's the reason why. Okay, there we go. We should be good to go. So the reason why I had an error was because I didn't enclose this in quotes. Because it's a string, it must have quotes inside. And then let's go ahead and run this. I don't think I'm gonna get the result I want, but oh, I did get the result I wanted. So I put a space over here after the quotation mark because I wanted a space in between. I wanted a space in between the two. And since kids is also a string, I put some quotes in it and then put a space to space the two out. And then I asked to print the name of the variable. So I said print the name, and then I put that in strings because that is, I put that in quotes because that is also a string, and I got this result. So hopefully that made some sense, but that is essentially how we can combine a regular string and a variable together. I'm just going to go ahead and clear the confusion and do something other than a string. Let's say I made int and then I said 2, like that. And then what you're going to say here is, or how about I do something different? Let's say 2 plus, and then that, and then plus, let's do, I might get some errors here. What happened? Oh, that's why. Name. There we go. And there we got 2 kids. So what I did here is, so there's a little bit of a syntax thing you need to know. So if you're doing a variable first, if you're doing the variable name first in your print statement, then you would want to do a plus and then 2 quotes in between, because names cannot have quotes enclosed in them. I mean, not names, variable names. So in this case, it's a variable name. If we put it in quotes, then it's going to recognize it as a string, and it's not a string, so we don't put quotes in that. Instead, we do a plus and then 2 quotes in between. That way we can still get the space if we want it. And then I put kids in quotes because kids is in fact a string. 2, however, is not a string because name 2 is being stored inside name, and name is not a string, it's an integer. So we don't put quotes on that. And then finally, one more thing I want to go over is how you can store more than one thing. So let's say int, can I make x? I don't think that works. Oh, that works. And then let's say y equals 2, and then int z equals 3. Let's put some colons in there. And then let's say x plus y plus z. So what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to add, I mean, I could do that. There's obviously going to be a better way to do this, but this is the one I have on top of my head. So I made x2, y2, and z3, and I'm combining 3 different integers. So let's go ahead and run this. And as you see, you get 7 because it added the 3 up. And that is pretty much it for this video. If you enjoyed it, be sure to go down there and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, leave a like down below if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys next time.